Hello, everyone, and we welcome you into the Pioneer Weekly Recap and Preview Show. I'm Brian Staten. Today, it'll be more of a recap show. A lot of preview stuff that we can talk about, but a lot of things away from campus going on this week. So to stay up to date with your favorite team and what's going on this week in Tusculum Athletics, visit the website at TusculumPioneers.com to get the latest updates, stories, scores, and so on and so forth. The recap is somewhat historical in nature. We're going to start with the Tusculum bowling team over the weekend in Harahan, Louisiana, competing against 16 teams, 7 of which were ranked, and playing, bowling for just 3 consecutive days. Tusculum finishing 11th out of 16th, but how they got there is somewhat remarkable as well. For this, Tusculum went just number 1, bowling the first ball and knocking down the very first pin, historic in nature. But on the very first day, defeating Grambling State and also 14th ranked Tulane, marking some of the highlights of the weekend for Tusculum. But once they got to Sunday, they had a banner day on Sunday. The Tusculum University women's bowling team finished strong. They went 3-0 Sunday at the All-State Sugar Bowl Collegiate Invitational, which was held in Louisiana, hosted by Tulane. The Pioneers, at now 5-8, won all 3 of their Baker best of 7 matches on Sunday. Not that I know exactly what that is. Next week, I'll have Chris Linker come in and we'll find out what all of this bowling terminology means. But for this Tusculum women team, they knock off Texas Southern and Valparaiso as they do that by identical scores of 4-2. They claimed the 11th place honors by avenging Saturday's loss to Jackson State, defeating them convincingly 4-1. Sunday's first match against Texas Southern, they opened the game with a loss, but then bounced back with wins. Against Valparaiso, they jumped out to a 2-0 lead, but Valpo won the third before Tusculum would close them out. The final match of the day, the Pioneers won the first 2 and would close out Jackson State by going 4-1. Sam Houston State did win the All-State Sugar Bowl Collegiate. They went 3-0 on Sunday against wins against top-ranked Vanderbilt. They did finish first. Vanderbilt was second, and Maryland Eastern Shore was third. The other quote-unquote South Atlantic Conference team competing was Lincoln Memorial, also nationally ranked, and they would finish 8th. So in Tusculum's very first competition on the road down in Louisiana, finishing 11th. Pretty remarkable for the Tusculum women's bowling team. Again, congratulations to them, and hopefully a lot more coming up for them as well. A lot of other things historical in nature for the Tusculum athletics was that of the McCullough sisters in tennis, and Coach Jackson has talked about how good they are. And I guess when you look at national championships, you always think it's going to be on some stage, whether it's broadcast on CBS or ESPN or somewhere like that. But the NCAA still gives out national championships. And then there is something known as, in the tennis circuit, as the ITA, which also claims a national championship. It would have been, or could have been, the very first in Tusculum history when I talk about what is going on down in Rome, Georgia this past weekend. Where the McCullough sisters were competing, Annie and Caitlin finished as Division II runner-up in women's doubles at the ITA Cup on Saturday, which recognizes the top Division II, Division III, NAIA, so on and so forth, tennis competitors nationally throughout this particular competition. The McCullough sisters lost to Nova Southeastern team of Natalie Espinal and Sarah Wardenberger by a score of 7-6 and 6-4 in a match that was delayed, though, by several hours due to rain. They actually had to move that indoors at the Lawrence Plantation down there in Rome, Georgia. What they were competing for was a national championship and then the ability to advance to California to compete at a level against Division I tennis players. However, it still would have been recognized as a national championship. Annie McCullough was competing as a single as well. She did compete in the ITA Cup. She did finish in the consolation round as she was bounced early on Friday before she completed her day on Saturday with a 6-2, 6-3 win against Azusa Pacific's Anna Sachenkov. So for Annie and for Caitlin, congratulations to them for what they were able to do and how they were able to compete at such a prestigious tournament, looking for Tusculum's first ever national championship, coming up just short, once again, as the runners-up in the ITA. There were also some hardware handed out for the Pioneer football team for the very first time this year, and that goes to Dee Alford. And Dee has played phenomenally over his 3+ years at Tusculum. He's a 2-time All-South Atlantic Conference number 2 at the end of each year over the last 2 years. But D this past Saturday was named the AstroTurf South Atlantic Conference Defensive Football Player of the Week. He recorded 6 tackles, including 1 for loss. He also had an interception, which set up Tusculum's very first touchdown to propel the Pioneers to a 21-19 win. The interception for him was his second this year, his 7th of his career, which is tied for 6th in school history. He's also been great returning punts. He had 6 punt returns for 92 yards, including a career-best 52-yarder this past Saturday, as D. Alford was named the South Atlantic Conference AstroTurf Defensive Player of the Week. And we would like to say a little shout out to our Zaxby's Athletes of the Week as well. And we return back to the tennis courts where Annie and Caitlin McCullough were named the Zaxby's Athletes of the Week. Talked about what they were able to do and how they were able to get into that national championship competition in doubles. Again, that was delayed because of rain. Unable to produce the national championship itself, but did finish as a runner-up. And David Johnson, who was out of football over the last 3 weeks, injured in the Newberry contest. Wasn't sure that he was actually going to be back in the game, finishing with 6 tackles, including 4 for loss, and his very first sack. Our Zaxby's Athlete of the Week, David Johnson, Annie and Caitlin McCullough here at Tusculum. So as I said, make sure you stay up to date with what's going on campus by visiting online through TusculumPioneers.com. If you're going to be keeping up with some of the home athletic events that's going on this week, Tusculum will be at home against UNC Pembroke, the women celebrating in soccer their senior weekend this coming weekend as well. To get the latest on that, TusculumPioneers.com. We'll recap the week next week and preview what's happening when we come back next week. For all those behind the scenes here at the Pioneer Sports Network, I'm Brian Staten, and until next week, go Pioneers.